This happened to me about 11 years ago. For reference, I'm a female, and I was 18 at the time. A little bit of background. I grew up in a very small town in Wisconsin where everyone knew you by your first name. Nobody even locked their doors. It was the kind of town that was portrayed in a Norman Rockwell painting. All the neighbors were friendly and always willing to help each other. Some people may think that I'm being just idealistic, but it truly was a perfect place to grow up. It was simple and predictable. However, simple and predictable often walk hand in hand with plain and boring. Growing up, I always dreamed about moving to a big city, where the buildings touched the sky and there were too many people to count. A place full of endless adventure, where people dined in fancy restaurants and went to parties on the rooftops. They would sip champagne out of beautiful glasses while they chatted about their summer homes and their latest vacations. I knew that someday I would do all these things that I had only read about in books. When I was a junior in high school, I had started applying to colleges that were anywhere but here. As my senior year started coming to an end, I had gotten offers from a few places, but there was one in particular that I anxiously waited to hear from the most. And finally, the day came when I received a letter addressed to me from that college. I felt like my heart had skipped a beat as I quickly opened the letter. I had been accepted and offered a full scholarship at the college of my dreams. This was it. This is what I had waited for, and this is why I had studied so hard. I could hardly contain my excitement as I ran to tell my parents the good news. Let's just say they weren't as nearly as happy about this as I was, but none of that mattered. I was going to make my own way instead of letting this small town predict my life. So when August came around, I packed up my bags and said my goodbyes to my mom, dad, sister, and my little brother. As I got in my car, I took one more look around and waved goodbye. Then I drove away, leaving the only life I had ever known for the life that I had always dreamed about. 14 long hours later, and I finally made it. It was late, but the city was still very much awake and almost magically to see. The day had been a long one, and I needed a good night's sleep. I had to stay in a hotel that night, and then in the morning I would go to the college and get all set up in my dorm room. The next few weeks were very busy. After I got all settled in and started my classes, I still needed to find a part-time job for my expenses. My roommate then suggested that I check on Craigslist. Back home, we didn't have Craigslist, so I wasn't really familiar with it, but I got online and checked out the job section. Right away, I found a post about a house cleaning job. Growing up, my mom cleaned houses in a city that was about an hour away from us, and in the summer on the weekends, I would help her. Since I already had experience in this, I figured that would be the perfect job, and it paid $300 each week. So I sent an email inquiring about the job. Right away, I got a response. They gave me some information about what they wanted done, and it was all just pretty basic house cleaning chores. They asked if I could start that Saturday, and I quickly responded with yes. Growing up in a small town has advantages, but it also has some disadvantages too. I was pretty naive about the world outside of that small town that I grew up in. I just automatically thought that people were honest and were not out to hurt me. Boy, was I wrong. When 9 a.m. on Saturday rolled around, I got up and dressed and headed out the door to start my new job. I didn't have to be there until 1 p.m., so I ran a few errands first. My roommate wasn't there when I left, but I decided to leave her a note with the address of where I was going. Looking back now, I'm so glad that I did. It was about a 45-minute drive outside of the city. When I turned onto the road that the house was on, there were very few other houses around. I really didn't think that much about it at the time. I pulled into the long driveway and got out of my car. As I did, I had a strange feeling come over me, but I brushed it off and just walked up to the door and knocked. It was about a minute before someone came to the door. I was a little surprised because I had thought I had been communicating with a woman, but instead it was a man that opened the door. I asked about the ad just to make sure I was at the correct house, and he assured me that I was. He said that his wife had placed the ad, but she had a few errands to run, but she would be back later. He motioned for me to come on in, and he said he would show me around. As he shut and locked the door behind me, I had a bit of an uneasy feeling. He took me into the kitchen first, and he showed me around and what exactly needed to be done. We then went into the living room, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. After he finished showing me around the house, he told me there was one more area they would like me to clean: the basement. I've never liked basements. I think they just give off an eerie vibe. As he started walking down the steps, he told me to follow him so he could show me what I needed to clean down there. I started slowly walking down there when I then caught a glimpse of what looked like chains laying on an old dirty mattress. He looked at me, and the only way to describe it is that it was pure evil. Just then, there was a loud banging on the front door. I looked towards the top of the stairs and then quickly glanced back at him. As he took a step up towards me, I quickly turned and then sprinted for the door. I unlocked it as quickly as I could, and there stood my roommate with her boyfriend and a couple of his friends. We all then quickly headed back to our cars. One of his friends got in the driver's seat of my car because I was just way too shaken to drive, and we got the hell out of there as fast as we could. Once we got back to campus, I had calmed down a bit. I asked my roommate how she even knew that I needed help. She said that she had found my note and tried texting and calling me, but that I never answered. Once she hadn't heard back from me for hours, she got worried and decided that she needed to find me. Turns out I had my phone on silent, and I never even knew she was trying to contact me. Thank goodness I decided to leave a note and that she found it when she did, or I might have never been heard from again. I reported it to the police, but they said there was nothing they could really do because a crime had not been committed. I also checked back on Craigslist, but the post had already been taken down. You should always trust your instincts. When something just doesn't feel right, don't do it. Even though this was the scariest thing that had ever happened to me, I wasn't going to let the fear it caused me define my future. A few weeks later, I got a job on campus. Some years later, I graduated, and I actually decided to move back to that simple town and open an office there. I enjoyed every moment of my college years, as well as the memories that I made there. But sometimes life calls you back to the very place you couldn't wait to leave. Before I start on my story, I want to give a warning for sexual assault and also graphic details. This is a heavy one, so if you don't want to listen, please skip to the next story. This happened to me a few years back. For reference, I'm a 29-year-old female from a small town in the Midwest. This happened when I was 23. I left out a few things and used different names, of course, to protect the people that matter to me. I had just broken up with my boyfriend that I had been with for 3 years. He had cheated several times and I just couldn't take it anymore. I needed a change, a fresh start. I had been working at a bar for the last 2 years. One night and a few shots of Jack, I decided to throw caution to the wind and apply at some places at a beach that I had visited once when I was 7 with my mom. About a week had gone by and I was checking my email. There it was, a response from one of the restaurants that I had applied at. They wanted to set up a phone interview for the next day. I was excited, but I was nervous. I asked myself if I was brave enough to really do this. Could I pack up and leave everything behind and start over again? The time came around and I did my phone interview. They offered me a job after only speaking with me for about 10 minutes, and I quickly took their offer. I was starting in 2 weeks. I immediately gave 1 week notice at work. Most of my friends were really excited about this new chapter in my life. I heard my ex said I'd never make it in a place like that, and it'd give me a month before I was back there asking to get back together. Besides my family, the one that took it the hardest was my roommate. She was really sad that she was losing me. I would miss her too, I told her. My friends and family promised to come visit me as soon as I found a place to live and got all set up. I started looking for a place to rent pretty much immediately. I had some money saved up, so I'd be able to do a small deposit in first month's rent, or so I thought. I hadn't taken into consideration that a beach town is not going to be a cheap place to live, so I decided maybe a better option was to try to rent a room until I saved up enough to get a place of my own. I started looking on Craigslist for available rooms, and there was quite a bit of them available, but most were very expensive, or whenever I inquired about them, the people just seemed batshit crazy. Those are stories for another time. About 4 days before I was supposed to start work, I came across a post that seemed perfect. It stated that they were looking to rent out a room in their beach house for the summer. It really didn't give too many other details, so I shot them a quick email to find out more information. They responded pretty quickly, telling me that a deposit wasn't necessary if I was working locally and I could just keep up the house for them. That was great news. The rent was only $400 a month, which was unbelievable. So we exchanged phone numbers, and then I packed up my car so I could get an early start the next morning. After spending all day on the road, I was finally there just before dark. Following my GPS, I turned onto the street that it took me to. However, I thought it was beachfront, but the street was several blocks before the ocean. They also said their sports car would be parked out in front. As I pulled up at the address, I decided to send a quick text just to make sure I was at the right place. I waited a few minutes, but got no response. Just looking at the house, this wasn't anything that I expected from the description. It looked old and run down, and the neighborhood looked very uninviting. If I had to guess, it was probably built in the 70s, as was the sports car that sat out front. I decided to just get out of the car and go up to the house. As I approached, it looked dark inside, like nobody was even home. As I knocked on the door, I had heard a guy say, "It's open, come on in." I reluctantly opened the door and stepped inside. I noticed there was only a couch in there. As I walked across the living room floor towards the kitchen, I could see into the bedroom where there was just a 4-post bed, which seemed very strange, but I thought maybe he had just started to move in there. As I entered the kitchen, there stood the guy with his back to me, and as unbelievable as this next part is, it's completely true. He was wearing a cape. Yes, you heard me right. A damn cape. When he turned around, he looked to be maybe in his early 20s. It was hard to tell because there was only a small lamp on. I then said, "Hi, I'm Emily. Are you Drake?" He responded with yes. He starts by telling me how lovely I look and loves how my long blonde hair lays across the side of my face. Right away, I'm thinking, great. Another damn weirdo who's probably into some really messed up stuff. He tells me how he really only has the one bedroom and I could sleep in there alone if I wanted, and he could stay on the couch, or we could look for a 2-bedroom place somewhere together. I kind of just froze. I wasn't really sure what I should say. I didn't want him to hear the fear in my voice. I made small talk for a few minutes. Then I said I had to go to my day job and drop off some papers, then I would text him later on. As I turned and headed for the door, he quickly came up behind me and then grabbed me by the arm. I was visibly startled, and I tried to pull away from him, but he had a really tight grip on me. I nervously asked him what he was doing and to let go of me immediately. He said that he just didn't want me to leave so quickly because I hadn't even looked around the place. As he slowly released his grip from my arm, I told him it was just because I was starting the new job and I didn't want to make a bad impression by not going by. I also said I had given them the address. I didn't want him to think nobody knew that I was here. I told him I could come back after. I was relieved when he finally accepted my answer and let me walk out of the house. I quickly then got in my car and drove away. After what I thought was a safe place to pull over, I stopped my car and just sat there and cried. What the hell had I gotten myself into? What was I thinking going so far from home to a place that I didn't know anyone? Maybe my ex was right and I couldn't make it here on my own. I went to a hotel for the night. I decided that the next day I would go to the restaurant that I would be working at to tell them that I've changed my mind and I can't take the job. The next morning I walked into the restaurant and it was one of the coolest places that I'd ever been. As I waited for the owner, I decided to look around. There were pictures on the wall of celebrities that had eaten there, and it was the locals' favorite hangout. There was a deck outside where customers could listen to live music as they watched the tide coming in and out. And I imagined in the evening that it was beautiful to sit and watch the sun setting over the ocean waves, all as the moon rose from its slumber to make a path on the ocean to light your way. Then a hand touching my shoulder brought me back to reality as the owner introduced himself to me. As we sat down to chat, I told him that I hadn't been able to find a decent place to live, and I thought that I should probably go back home. To my surprise, he said that he had a deal with one of his buddies who owned a condo building with places available for his employees to rent. I just couldn't believe it. It was just the news I needed to reassure myself that I was exactly where I should be. He wrote down the address for me and called his friend right in. He told me to go get all settled and he'd see me in the morning. That night, I had looked back on Craigslist to see if the ad from the creepy guy was still there, but the listing had been taken down. I pushed the strange encounter aside and my thoughts went to how I couldn't wait until tomorrow. It didn't take long for me to get comfortable in my new place and at my new job. My coworkers were amazing, and so were the locals, so I made friends pretty quickly. Fast forward a few months later, I was out one night at another local bar in the area with some friends. We were sitting outside just enjoying what was left of summer when I overheard a few people at another table talking about a friend that had basically been kidnapped and assaulted a few weeks back when she'd gone to look at a room for rent. This definitely caught my attention. I spoke up and said that I was sorry for intruding, but I couldn't help but overhear their conversation about their friend. I asked for some details, and when they started telling me, I was speechless. They said that she had come out there a few months back with some girl that she had met online, but really didn't know her that well. The girl ended up kicking her out, and that she'd been staying with them for a few weeks, but they just didn't have a room for anyone else to live there. So she had saw an ad on Craigslist, and from the details, I just knew that it had to be the same guy that had placed the same ad from before. They went on to tell me that as she was trying to leave, he grabbed her, and when she tried to fight back, he knocked her unconscious. When she finally regained consciousness, she tried to sit up but couldn't. She then started to panic as she then noticed she was tied to his bedposts, and then as she saw the blood running down her body, she started to cry. The pain was flowing through her body as the flood of horrible scenes started replaying in her head. It all started to come back to her now. After he had knocked her out and tied her up, he waited until she was awake. She remembered seeing him just sitting there at the end of the bed. Then as he looked at her with dark, soulless eyes, she gasped as a sinister grin came across his face. He told her that he wanted her to be awake for her crossing over. Crossing over, she thought to herself. What the hell does that mean? But as he started to assault her, she just shut down. Then the sound of a car outside snapped her back to the present, and she could hear him talking to someone, then getting in their car and driving away. This was her chance, she thought, and maybe her only one to escape with her life. She started pulling her wrists, trying to somehow get out of the ropes that were tied around them. As she started pulling her hands, she had heard a small crack sound. She looked at the bedpost, and one of them had a slight crack in it. So she had started pulling her arm as hard as she could. She wasn't even thinking about the pain. She just knew that she had to get herself untied and out of this place before it got back. Finally, after several times, the post broke. She quickly untied her other hand and her feet. She grabbed a t-shirt from the floor and put it on. She quietly made her way through the house and out the back door so to not be noticed by anyone just in case. She stumbled her way through the dark and back to her friend's place. As she walked through the door and saw her friend, she just collapsed and fell to the floor. When she woke up the next morning, she was in a hospital bed with machines softly beeping and an IV in her arm. Her head was throbbing from being hit with whatever he'd used to knock her unconscious. Just as she slightly sat up and started to look around, a nurse then came into the room. She told her that she was glad to see that she was awake and that the doctor would be in shortly. After a few minutes later, the doctor came in the room, then accompanied by the same nurse from earlier. He asked her how she was feeling, and she said that she felt a little groggy. The nurse said that is expected because of the pain medication she had been given. The doctor had asked a few questions just to see if she remembered who she was and how she got here. She replied with, "Yes, my name is Amelia, and the last thing I remember is walking into my friend's house, but waking up here." The doctor asked if she remembered what happened to her the night before. With tears in her eyes, she simply shook her head yes. She was visibly shaken and had a terrified look on her face as she then slid back down into the bed. The doctor assured her that she was safe now, and her friends were in the waiting room and couldn't wait to see her. The doctor told her that the police were waiting to speak to her too as soon as she felt ready. He also told her that she had received a blood transfusion because she had lost a lot of blood, but that she was responding to it very well and should feel better soon. This made her start to cry even harder, and she could feel the panic welling up in her chest. The doctor said that she could wait until the morning to speak with the police if she wanted, and through her tears and sobbing, she said, "Yes, thank you." The doctor said he'd be back in the morning, and the nurse would give her something to help her rest. As the nurse got the medicine to help her relax and get some sleep, she asked if she could get up and look in the mirror. The nurse said that she should really just stay in bed until tomorrow. She quietly agreed and then laid back down. The next morning when she woke up, she quietly got out of bed and went over to the mirror. She then carefully removed the bandage on her neck. When she saw the marks on her neck, she knew that it wasn't just a horrible nightmare. It had really happened. Just then, the nurse walked in. As Amelia turned to look at her, all she could do was cry. The nurse gave her a hug and let her cry it out. Then she helped her back into the bed. A few minutes later, the police came in, and they asked her if she could recall the events from the night that she was assaulted. She said yes and told them everything. It was really hard to hear the words come out of her mouth. It seemed like it was a story that happened to someone else. When she got to the part about the marks on her neck, even the police were shocked. The man had bit her several times on both sides of her neck with fang-like teeth. This was how she had lost so much blood, and it also explained why he was wearing a cape. He had told her that he was a vampire, and that's what he had meant when he said that he wanted to watch her cross over. The police said they would keep her posted about what they find out. She was really scared though, and asked them to please not make this public. She was terrified that he would find her and hurt her again. The police assured her that because she was only 17, nothing about her would be made known to the public. They thanked her and then left the room. The next day, she was able to leave. She spoke to the police, but they said when they went by the house, there was nothing there but an old couch. They said that they had also spoken with the neighbors and was told that nobody had lived there for a very long time. One neighbor said that he had seen a guy sometimes over there but had never really got a good look at him. It wasn't the best neighborhood, so people just minded their business because they were too afraid to get involved in things. When Amelia heard this, her heart sank. She thanked them for trying and just turned around and walked away. Sitting there listening to the story was one of the hardest things I had ever done. I can't imagine what that poor girl had to go through. And then I thought about how that could have been me. They said that she ended up leaving and moving back somewhere on the West Coast where she was originally from, and they hadn't heard from her since. They figured that she just wanted to try and forget it in this place. I decided I needed to tell the police what I knew. They listened quietly, and it didn't seem like what I was saying even mattered. They took down my name and phone number and said if something came up they would contact me, but they never did. That was 6 years ago. I had beat the odds, I guess, and I had built a life here. After working there for a couple of years, I had moved up to become the manager. I had also met the man that 4 years later would become my husband. We also just welcomed our sweet little girl who's the center of our life. Looking back on it now, I wouldn't have changed anything that happened. Well, except what happened to that poor girl. I still think about her once in a while, and I really pray that she's okay. As for the monster who inflicted so much pain on her and who knows how many others, I really hope that he gets what's coming to him. I needed a new roommate quickly, and eventually settled on this chick from Florida who was moving out to San Diego. She initially came off as a little goofy and naive over the phone, but in person she was just strange. She had no sense for personal boundaries, would eat all of my food, use my laptop in my room when I wasn't home to go on plentyoffish.com, and would barge into my room when I had friends over to say the weirdest shit, all within the first week. She did and said a ton of weird things in the month she lived with me. She started hanging out with a coworker from Subway along with her coworker's boyfriend who just got out of jail and 4 of his friends. They really only came around because she would buy stuff, and they laughed at the dumb shit that she would do and say. She would always leave the window cracked because she lost her keys a lot and would talk about how she did that all the time. Anyway, her friends broke into the house. They stole my TV, my laptop, the smaller TV that I had in my room, this wedding dress that my aunt wanted to sell on eBay for her, a bunch of DVDs, and my prescription glasses too. I called her freaking out about it, and she was just getting home, and she said she had called the cops on me because her broken laptop got stolen, and she suggested that I took all of my stuff out of the apartment to steal her crappy broken laptop. Cops came and they pulled me aside, and they told me that she seemed unstable and suggested that I don't use Craigslist for roommates anymore. I had her backed against the wall and was screaming at her with my finger in her face when the cops walked in. I thought I was screwed when they saw that, but after talking to her for just 5 minutes, they seemed to understand my frustrations with her. The cops just took down what was stolen, and I took her key away and then put her one box of crap outside of the apartment. I eventually got my stuff back on my own because I made up some bullshit about having hidden cameras and that I wouldn't show them to the cops if I got all my stuff back. And somehow that worked. I was new to a big city and decided I didn't need my car anymore. I listed my car for sale, a 6-year-old Honda Accord. A normal, well-dressed man comes over to see it after a few phone calls about it. He's in his early 40s and his name is James. He's buying it for his daughter in college. I always have my guard up when dealing with strangers, but so far James is personable and he seems legitimate. He test drives it with me in it. He does a thorough inspection. He negotiates the price with me for a while. He asked me to hold the car for 2 days so he can get the money and come pick it up. I agree. A 2-day hold where I won't sell it to someone else. 2 days later, James follows up and we meet again. Midday, normal neighborhood in an urban city. James and I test drive the car one more time. He gave me a Chase Bank cashier's check, which I said was fine. I tell him he needs to come to the bank with me to cash his check and to get the title notarized over to him. This is when he starts acting nervous. We're pulled over on the side of my street discussing this, James in the driver's seat and me as the passenger. I figured if he was going to steal my car, he would have done it 2 days earlier. Now I'm fairly comfortable with him. He asked me to do one more car inspection with him, then we'd go to the bank. I agree, but I'm very set on doing the transaction at a bank. As we both get out to inspect the car again, he jumps back in and floors it as I try to get back in with him. He pulls away quicker than I can react, and the passenger door was wide open. I try to run after him, and then realized I'm not as fast as a car. There are bystanders, and I hysterically ask someone to call 911. One guy does, and I had my phone with me, but my adrenaline was through the roof and didn't even think of it. As I'm on a stranger's phone with dispatch, an undercover cop car with 2 officers pull out of an alley 5 feet from me. I wave them down and hysterically explain my story. They tell me to hop in the back of their car, which I do. I implore them to hurry and we can catch this guy. He just drove off. I explain the car and plate and everything. They assure me that they will not go on a high-speed chase with me in the car, but will radio it in to all the surrounding officers, which they do. The guy gets away and the officers drop me off at the police station to file a report. I filed an insurance claim too, and I was so mad at myself for letting this happen. I suppose it's better than if I was in the car with the guy, but I'm still mad. Of course, James' burner cell phone doesn't work as soon as he had left. I go through insurance and their protocols to ensure that I'm not committing fraud for about 3 months. The week I'm supposed to get paid, I get a call from the police. They found my car 3 states over. James was apparently working with a partner in crime. I don't remember his name, so let's just call him Dickface. James stole the car and gave it to Dickface to sell so it wasn't traceable back to James, and Dickface would have plausible deniability if he was ever questioned. Well, Dickface sold my car to an average Joe who actually did have a daughter in college who needed a car. The daughter tried to register a new car at the DMV, and it came up as stolen. So the cops arranged for me, the average Joe, and Dickface to meet up with them at the station for a little chat. Dickface denies any involvement with James, but he agrees to give us the money back that average Joe paid him if he can just leave without any problems. We all agree to this. Average Joe and I say his daughter can keep the car, and I'll just take the money from Dickface. So eventually I got paid for my car, but this experience really sucked balls and was very stressful. Since then, I've still bought and sold cars on Craigslist, so no lesson was learned, except that now I take a photo of the driver's license of all of the people that I interact with at the very start. I don't take any chances anymore. This was back in my single mom online dating days. Good old 2016. I came across a decent looking man on Plenty of Fish who lived in my hometown. I did all the right things. Googled him, checked his social media, chatted for weeks before meeting, and met in public. The guy who I'll call Mike seemed very nice. Even bought a small toy for my toddler son. There just wasn't a romantic connection. We both agreed being friends was a better idea and carried on chatting through text. I continued my pursuit of a relationship and my friendship with Mike for probably a few weeks when a family friend called my mother frantic about a post that she'd seen on Craigslist about me. What I found seemed innocent enough. A stranger professing their desire to help me. I was a single mom working in a fast food drive-thru. It was no secret that I was struggling financially. I found it more funny than anything, but I was also curious. My Craigslist admirer turned out to be a friend of my mother who had a crush on me for some years. I was only 22 at the time, and yet this isn't the creepy guy of the story. The older man admitted that he had made his post while drunk after seeing a listing by me, offering sexual favors for money. Pictures of my face photoshopped onto nude bodies, my real name, my place of work. The fact I was a single mom living all alone, all listed in an ad offering sexual favors for money. I was mortified. Luckily, the post wasn't up for long after the older man reached out to it and took screenshots. Also, luckily the poster was stupid enough to use their real phone number and a selfie I'd only sent to one person. It was Mike. I chewed him out and cut him off immediately. Looking back now, I wish I had done more, and I thank God that I wasn't targeted or assaulted as a result of this disgusting creep. My roommate V was always at her boyfriend's place, so I was living essentially alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, and my friend Esme was crashing with me while looking for her own place. She had found a place nearby renting a master bedroom with an attached bathroom, female only, for way cheap. We checked out the Google Street View on my laptop, and it looked like a cute little beach house. She rode her bike over there to check it out alone. The house was right by the beach and tons of people were always around, so we thought nothing of it. She said that it was 2 beach-type white guys, A young disheveled stoner guy, and a middle-aged parrot-head guy that would close talk while giving her obvious elevator eyes the whole time. She's a pretty petite Mexican girl and was only 21, but looked younger, and the older guy kept saying that she was just what they were looking for, but he was saying it kinda slowly in what she described as an uber creepy voice. The younger guy just stared and followed them around. She thought it was odd that they each slept in the tiny guest rooms and that they were renting out the master bedroom, but decided to take a look at it anyway. She said it was a really nice room and a big heavy wooden 4-poster bed in the middle of the room that looked like it belonged in a castle, and the bathroom had a huge shower with multiple shower heads on the walls, like it was built for a bunch of people to shower at once. She didn't like it being in the back bedroom with the two guys looming over her, so she said it was really stuffy and she wanted to make sure her unlocked bike in the front yard was okay. She all but ran to the front yard, and once she was outside with bystanders, she felt much safer. She's standing in the front yard with the older guy, and he's explaining that she can move in right away, but the bed has to stay exactly where it is. It comes with the room and is bolted to the floor, so it can be moved. They have special sheets for it and everything, so she can bring all of her stuff, but can never move that bed. Also, she can have friends over, but only if they're also young women or girls, no men, and they can sleep over, but they also need to sleep in the bed. The hardwood floor was just too uncomfortable. The couches in the living room are suede, so no one can sleep on them. All of these reasons why a big pile of girls need to sleep on the bed. So she's sufficiently creeped out by this guy, and she texts me to come over. I ride my bike over, and as I'm pulling up, she's leaving. We start to ride a little away, and he yells out after us, "It's mandatory, but we always have a blast." She kinda shudders, and I ask her what's up. She says that she'll tell me over drinks, so we ride to the nearest little beach bar. She explains about the room, the bed, and the guys, and then tells me that part of the deal is a mandatory skiing trip to Lake Tahoe in Northern California each year. She can invite girls on the trip that have been to the house before if the guys think they're cool enough. It's free for her and her girlfriends, but mandatory that she goes with the guys as their official woman. There would be other men there, but they all brought their own women. He said it like the women would be assigned to them or something. So our minds start racing, and we then convince ourselves that the bedroom and trip are some elaborate webcam and BDSM situation or something. Needless to say, she never moved in there or took them up on their free ski weekend offer. They ended up moving in with her boyfriend, and Esme moved in with me for a couple of years. She was an awesome roommate. Maybe 2.5 years back, I met a chick at a bar. She had been stood up and I'd just knocked off for the day. I didn't go there with any idea to score. I just wanted a couple of pints to help me unwind. I'd been there for around 45 minutes when the bartender slipped me a note. It was from a girl sitting at the end of the bar. She asked me to grab a table with her so we could talk. My curiosity was piqued. So I looked to my right and locked eyes with possibly the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. I thought that maybe I'd been given the note accidentally. No way a girl that hot was interested in me. To make sure, I pointed at the note and then mouthed, "Was this for me?" Then pointed to myself. To my amazement, she nodded yes. That's where our evening began. I grabbed a quiet table in the corner and she joined me. We introduced ourselves before getting to the small talk. Her name was Amber, and she was 25. Close up, she was even more beautiful than I thought. I asked her why she'd written the note. I was genuinely curious. While I'm not a walking mess, I was nowhere near her level. The possibility I was being tricked came to mind, so I asked if I was being pranked, but she said no. It wouldn't be the first time. My friends seemed to think it was funny that any girl would like me. They put notes on my windshield at least twice pretending to be from a secret admirer. I never fell for it though. I'm far smarter than they think I am. This, however, looked to be a real encounter. If it was, I was going to play it all the way through. The getting to know each other continued another half hour until she asked if I wanted to take her home. I jumped on it, and we walked a few blocks to my apartment. We had a few more drinks and started messing around. I don't kiss and tell, so I'll just say we enjoyed one another's presence for the rest of the night. When I awakened the next morning, she was already gone. I wrote it off as just an amazing dream and hit the head. When I came out, a pair of beer bottles caught my eye. I walked over to get a closer look. One had lipstick residue on the mouth. I still wasn't positive. I walked over to the bed and sniffed the pillow opposite to mine. The wonderful smell threw me back to the previous evening. There was no doubt. It had really happened. I was over the moon for a long time. I hoped to see her again. I went as far as asking some employees if they knew how to find her, but none did. As time went by, however, I wrote it off as just a one-night stand. I began dating a new girl, a wonderful, fun chick to be around, but Amber stayed in the forefront of my mind. This new relationship never really went anywhere, and we ended things a few months in. Being newly single, I had hoped to track Amber down and maybe pick back up where we left off. I returned to the bar and asked around again. I got the same answer. I didn't have the money to hire a detective. Without a last name, I couldn't even do a search on the internet. Providence would arrive in the form of Craigslist. I was browsing the site and came across the missed connection section. It looked to be just as good as any other avenue, so I made a short description of our night together and how I'd like to meet up again. I posted it and went on with my life. All was quiet until day 8. A message came from someone claiming to be Amber. I asked a few questions. They knew all of the answers and even added things no one else could have known. I was overjoyed to be talking to her again and asked if we could meet for drinks. She agreed and suggested the place where we first met. It sounded perfect, almost romantic. I started to believe this may go somewhere. My months-long search was over. For the rest of the week, my stomach was in knots. I was counting the hours. Saturday eventually arrived and I made my way to meet her. She was visible from outside and more beautiful than I remembered. I joined her at the table, and the night went as much as it had on our first meeting, all but one thing. Throughout the evening, she checked her phone many times. I assumed that she was just nervous and tried to ignore it. It was a few hours before she then suggested we go back to her place. I'd been looking forward to this for months. On our way out, I visited the bathroom. As I walked away, I noticed that she was fiddling with her phone again. However, now she was making a call. I didn't care. Besides, maybe she was just calling her roommate. She was basically a stranger to me. For all I knew, she had kids. Once again, I didn't care. I mean, she'd hung up by the time I returned anyway, and we made our way to her car. I stumbled my way down the street until she pointed at this plain four-door sedan, and I then shuffled up to the passenger door. She unlocked it, and I fell into the seat. We closed our doors, but instead of starting the car, she just sat there looking at me and smiled at me. Oh, maybe she wants to make out. The idea perked me up. When I leaned over to kiss her, a strange male voice told me to stop. What? I was so drunk that I had a difficult time assessing the situation. I turned my head to the back seat and saw a large masked man pointing a gun at me. "Don't make me shoot you, cowboy!" Instantly, I sobered up. I could tell that he meant every word. I looked over to Amber. Our eyes met, and I knew I'd been tricked. They were cold, lacking any empathy. I was devastated. I lost my desire to live at that very moment. Moving much faster than I should have, I yanked my wallet from my pocket and threw it into the back seat. I think my nonchalance caught the man off guard. He said nothing, even as I stepped from the car and slammed the door. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood mute, staring at the pavement. It remained quiet for around 30 seconds until I heard the car start and then speed away. It wasn't long before I had a massive adrenaline dump. The seriousness of what had occurred mere minutes prior hit me like a truck. I hunched over and began vomiting. Massive amounts of booze and nachos poured from my guts. I eventually ran dry and returned to my feet. I wiped my mouth and made my way home. I wanted nothing but to sleep, and I didn't even bother to undress before falling into bed. Most of the day was gone when I woke up. I chugged a bottle of Gatorade, which was my hangover cure. The events of the previous night became clearer by the second. I felt so stupid, all the time that I'd wasted looking for her. Then I got angry, and my desire for revenge kicked in. A quick shower and a 2-mile walk later, I found myself filing a report. In Chicago, stick-ups generally don't get much attention. When the detective handed me some mugshots, I got the idea that I'd stumbled onto something a tad more serious. I was shocked to see the faces of Amber and her accomplice staring back at me. I pointed them out, and the detective gave me the lowdown. Only at that moment did I realize just how lucky I'd been. According to him, I had fallen prey to a scam. Amber's real name was Shannon, and she'd been a career con artist. The pair had been targeting single men for the last 6 months or more. I was thought to be their 5th victim, and the previous 3 had been killed. I felt a shudder through my body. The detective was unsure why I'd been allowed to live. That made 2 of us. Perhaps our history made me too much of a risk. Maybe she'd been pressured into doing it by her partner. I'll probably never know. It was hoped that I had some new information to give him, but I ended up being no help. We spoke a little longer before he sent me home. Now I was even more confused. I was happy to be alive, but on the other hand, however, I wonder why I'd been spared. I have one particularly funny theory, that they didn't consider $23 on a maxed out card worth killing over. But the truth is, it's not really a joking matter. Things wouldn't get any clearer when Amber's accomplice was arrested. He'd been brought in on unrelated charges, only to lawyer up the second he was asked any questions. He'll stay mum more than likely, even when presented with the possibility of execution. The detective on my case thinks Amber probably won't be caught for a long time, and even if she is, she'll go the way of silence too. If and when she's caught, I hope I can get a few minutes alone with her. Not because I wish her any harm. I've come to terms with her role in the crime. Instead, I'd like to ask why I was spared when others weren't. I'd like to think it's because we made some type of connection on an emotional level. Then again, that's probably just my romantic side thinking out loud. In truth, it probably just wasn't my time. Hey everyone, that's about it for today's stories. If you have your own story that you would like to send, you can send it in at southerncannibal.com, or you can email it at southerncannibalstories@gmail.com. I look forward to telling your story. Have a good night or good day, everyone, and remember to always stay